Welcome to this Spark Hub podcast episode. This episode is an interview with Mog or Moggy Hercules, who founded the Dallington School in London. This interview will be filed under Creativity on our main site, and there's a quote: "Creativity now is as important in education as literacy, and we should treat it with the same status." That was something said by Sir Ken Robinson, who did a very famous TED Talk, one of the most watched TED Talks, called "Do Schools Kill Creativity?" And while he was saying that quote in around, I think it was around 2006, if we go back in time to the 70s, there was someone named Mog Hercules, who we're about to interview, who actually created a school in London dedicated to creativity. So without further ado, this podcast is her explanation of the journey she went on, why she did what she did, and why creativity now is more important than it ever was. Good one. So the eureka moment. What was your eureka moment to start this school?
When I had my one teacher school in Australia, there were 45 children aged from 3 to 11, and I was extremely apprehensive about it being a successful educational experience. However, it worked. It worked to the advantage of every child who was in the school. The older ones working with the younger ones learning social skills and acceptable behaviour from the older ones. So it was a very cooperative, positive experience. When I arrived in London, I was looking for schools for my children, and I could not find a setting where I was happy to leave my children with the adults who were working there.
Really?
So I decided, okay, I'll have a go. Either foolhardy or not, I decided I would do it. I would try out this, more than a feeling, this experience I had of working in a cohesive, cooperative, considerate way with children and with their parents.
Which didn't exist at the time.
It certainly didn't exist at the time, yes.
And what year was this?
And this was in the, probably because I stayed at home as a mother, it would be in the early to mid-70s, yeah.
And then you came to the UK? What was that story? Because it sounds like the idea happened in Australia, but then you came to the UK to set up.
Yes,
That's
and
wonderful.
I did a significant amount of supply teaching because I'm also secondary arts trained. So I worked in schools in East London and I thoroughly enjoyed it. However, I found that for some of the exam conditions for art and to go to art school, they also had to have English, written English. So I used to include that in my lessons. We'd read poetry, we would have discussions, and I fought to take the children out to galleries, because that also didn't happen. Sort of taking the children outside was deemed to be at risk because they'd be going by public transport. You didn't know how they'd behave within the gallery. So I had to prove that it was the most beneficial experience of all.
Wow.
Letting them see the paintings, walk around a gallery, observe the behaviour of other people who were in the gallery. In fact, I just said to them, on the whole, adults don't like children, so you just show them how lovely you are.
So it seems to me, creative learning has been embedded in your head since the early days. And then suddenly you gave birth to this school. And how long has it been running now?
Nearly 40 years.
40 years?
Yeah.
And it's grown.
It's
from
grown,
strength to strength.
and I'm teaching the children of children I taught, which is really lovely, because
They all come back to the source.
They do.
That's wonderful.
It is wonderful.
And why do you believe, 40 years ago or today, that creative learning is so important for children?
Because man has always made marks, and historically we have the evidence. We have the Lascaux caves. We know how man survived in those days.
And if you were to start a new school again, this is hypothetical, if you were to do this all over again now, would you do anything differently?
No.
Exactly the same.
Absolutely not.
The same activities, the same curriculum, the same approach. It seems absolute.
No, I think it also has to be, the child has to know why we're taking up its time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will often say, so, what do you know now when they're going home that you didn't know this morning? And what are you going to discuss with your parents that you did and you understand and you enjoyed?
Yeah.
What are you going to tell them?
Thanks for listening to this episode of our podcast. If you like what you hear, you can dive into a lot more on thesparkhub.com.